Maya Johnson navigated Jefferson High School's hallways with practiced confidence, her white cane sweeping gracefully ahead of her. At 16, she had long ago mastered the art of moving through a world designed for the sighted. What she couldn't master was moving through a world sometimes designed to be cruel. "Watch it, blind girl," sneered Derek Martinez as he deliberately knocked her books from her arms. The heavy textbooks scattered across the hallway floor with loud thuds. Maya's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "My name is Maya." "Whatever," Derek laughed, his friends joining in. "Maybe you should stay home where you belong instead of getting in everyone's way." As Maya knelt to gather her books, she heard the familiar sound of expensive sneakers approaching. Brittany Chen, the school's self-appointed queen bee, had arrived. "God, this is so pathetic," Brittany said loudly enough for half the hallway to hear. "Doesn't she have, like, a special school or something? Why does she even try to fit in here?" Maya's hand stilled on her geometry textbook. She'd heard worse, but today the words cut deeper. It was the anniversary of the accident that had taken her sight when she was 8, a day that was always harder than the others. "I belong here just as much as you do," Maya said quietly, standing with her books clutched to her chest. "Do you though?" Derek stepped closer, his voice taking on a nastier edge. "I mean, what's the point? You can't drive, you can't see who's cute, you can't even tell if your clothes match. You're just broken." The word hung in the air like poison. Maya felt her carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. 3,000 miles away, Master Chief Petty Officer James Johnson was finishing a classified briefing when his phone buzzed with a text from his daughter. "Dad, can you call me when you get a chance?" "Bad day at school." James excused himself immediately. In 12 years of Navy SEAL operations, he'd faced down terrorists, survived impossible missions, and led men through the worst conditions imaginable. But nothing, absolutely nothing, made his blood run colder than knowing his little girl was hurting. He'd raised Maya alone since her mother died in the same car accident that took Maya's sight. For 8 years, he'd watched his daughter rebuild herself from a scared, broken 8-year-old into one of the strongest people he'd ever known. She had a 4.0 GPA, played piano beautifully, and had a spirit that could light up any room. Anyone who tried to dim that light would answer to him. "Princess," he said when she answered on the first ring. "Hey, Dad." Her voice was small, tired. "Are you busy?" "Never too busy for you." "What happened?" Maya told him everything, not just about today, but about months of escalating harassment she'd been hiding. The accidental shoulder checks in the hallway. The cruel comments. The social media posts she'd heard about but couldn't see, mocking photos of her taken without permission. James listened in silence, his jaw growing tighter with every word. He'd taught Maya to be strong, to stand up for herself, to never let anyone make her feel less than the extraordinary person she was. But there was a difference between building character and allowing cruelty. "Maya," he said finally, "Daddy's coming home." James arrived in their small Virginia town on a Thursday evening, 3 days before his scheduled leave was supposed to begin. He'd pulled in favors and moved mountains to get home early, telling his commanding officer only that there was a situation requiring immediate attention. That night, he sat with Maya at their kitchen table, drinking hot chocolate and planning strategy like the tactical operation it was about to become. "I don't want you to get in trouble, Dad," Maya said. "I can handle this." "I know you can, sweetheart. You're the strongest person I know. But you shouldn't have to handle it alone." James reached across and squeezed her hand. "Sometimes bullies only understand one kind of language. And lucky for us, I'm fluent." The next morning, James began his reconnaissance. He dressed in civilian clothes as jeans, a plain t-shirt that showed off his impressive build, and a baseball cap. To most people, he'd look like any other parent. But Maya had inherited her father's sharp instincts, and James had learned long ago that information was the most powerful weapon. Positioned himself across the street from Jefferson High at lunchtime and waited. Didn't have to wait long. Derek Martinez emerged from the cafeteria with his crew, immediately spotting Maya sitting alone at a picnic table in the courtyard. James watched as Derek approached his daughter, flanked by 3 other boys. Well, well, Derek's voice carried clearly across the courtyard. If it isn't Helen Keller Jr. Maya set down her sandwich but didn't look up. Go away, Derek. Or what? You'll stare at me really hard? The boys laughed. Oh wait, you can't stare at anything. James's hands clenched into fists, but he forced himself to remain still. Not yet, Derek leaned closer to Maya. You know what? I think it's time you learned your place. This table is for normal people. Without warning, he grabbed Maya's lunch tray and dumped it over her head, chocolate milk soaked through Maya's carefully chosen outfit. Sandwich contents dripped from her hair. The courtyard fell silent as other students turned to stare. Maya sat perfectly still for a moment, humiliation burning through her. Then she stood, feeling for her cane with as much dignity as she could muster. That's right, freak, Derek called after her as she walked away. Run home to mommy. Oh wait, you don't have one of those either, do you? James was moving before he realized it. Derek Martinez was riding high on adrenaline and social approval as he headed to his car after school. His video of the lunchtime incident was already going viral on social media, and he was basking in the attention, was so busy checking his phone that he didn't notice the mountain of a man leaning against his car until he was 5 feet away. James Johnson was an imposing figure under any circumstances, but when he was angry, he radiated the kind of controlled danger that made hardened criminals take a step back. At 6 feet 3 inches and 220 pounds of pure muscle, with scars that spoke of real violence and eyes that had seen too much, he was the kind of man who could communicate volumes without saying a word. Derek looked up from his phone and froze. Derek Martinez? James's voice was conversational, almost friendly. But there was something underneath it that made Derek's mouth go dry. Yeah? Do I know you? James pushed off from the car and took a single step forward. Derek instinctively stepped back. You know my daughter. Maya Johnson. The color drained from Derek's face. Look, man, if this is about lunch, we were just messing around. James repeated the words like he was tasting something bitter. Is that what you call pouring chocolate milk over a blind girl's head and mocking her dead mother? Derek's friends had noticed the confrontation and were approaching, probably thinking they'd back up their leader. James noticed them coming and smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. You might want to call your boys off, James said quietly. Unless they want to be part of this conversation too. Something in his tone made Derek wave frantically at his friends to stay back. Suddenly, this didn't feel like the kind of problem that could be solved with teenage bravado. Who are you, exactly? Derek managed. James reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. He flipped it open to show his military ID. Master Chief Petty Officer James Johnson, United States Navy SEALs. But you can call me Maya's father. Derek's legs nearly gave out. Everyone knew what Navy SEALs were capable of. These were the guys who killed Bin Laden, who could end you before you knew what was happening. Now, James continued, his voice never rising above a conversational tone, I want to tell you a story about my daughter. When Maya was 8 years old, she was in a car accident that killed her mother and took her sight. Do you know what she did in the hospital while she was learning that she'd never see again? Derek shook his head mutely. She asked me if I was okay. This little girl, lying in a hospital bed, her whole world destroyed, and she was worried about me. James's voice carried a mix of pride and old pain. She spent the next 8 years becoming one of the most remarkable people you'll ever meet. She has a perfect GPA. She speaks 3 languages. She plays piano better than most professionals. She volunteers at the animal shelter every weekend, and she's never, not once, used her blindness as an excuse for anything. Derek wanted to look away but found he couldn't. And you, James continued, decided that this extraordinary human being was someone you could torment for entertainment. I want you to understand something very clearly, James said, taking another step closer. I have spent 12 years in the Navy SEALs. I have been deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and places that don't officially exist. I have killed more people than you have fingers and toes, and every single one of them was a bigger threat to innocent lives than you are. Derek was visibly shaking now. But here's the thing about being Maya's father, it's the most important job I've ever had. And when someone threatens her happiness, her safety, or her sense of belonging in this world, they become my mission. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Why, yes, sir. I don't think you do. James's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Let me be more specific. If you ever, and I mean ever, speak to my daughter again, look at her wrong, bump into her accidentally on purpose, or even think about her in a way that makes her uncomfortable, I will find out. And when I do, you and I will have a much longer conversation. One that doesn't end with you walking away. James paused, letting that sink in. Now, I want you to think very carefully about your next words, because they might be the most important ones you ever speak. Are we clear? Yes, sir, Derek whispered. Crystal clear. Good. Now, about that video you posted, Derek's eyes went wide. How did you, son? I can find out what you had for breakfast 3 weeks ago if I want to. The video comes down tonight. And you're going to post an apology to Maya that makes it very clear that you're a coward who picks on people smaller than you because you're insecure about your own inadequacies. Derek nodded frantically. And Derek? James leaned in close enough that Derek could see his reflection in the man's dark eyes. If I find out you've been spreading rumors about this conversation, trying to make yourself look tough by claiming you weren't scared, or in any way attempting to save face from this situation, we're going to have a problem. A big one. Because the only thing I hate more than bullies is liars. Derek Martinez wasn't the only target on James's list that evening. While Derek was frantically deleting social media posts and composing an apology, James was having a very different conversation with Brittany Chen and her parents in their expensive suburban home. The Chens had initially been defensive when this stranger showed up at their door demanding to speak with them about their daughter. That defensiveness had evaporated quickly when James calmly explained who he was and why he was there. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, James said, sitting in their pristine living room while Brittany cowered on the couch next to her parents. Your daughter has been leading a harassment campaign against my blind daughter for months. This isn't teenage drama or typical social conflict. This is sustained psychological abuse of a disabled child. Mrs. Chen looked mortified. Brittany, is this true? Brittany, who was used to manipulating situations to her advantage, found herself completely out of her depth. There was something about James Johnson that made lying impossible. She's different, and she's different, James repeated. Yes, she is. She's more intelligent, more resilient, and more decent than you'll probably ever be. Those are differences you should aspire to, not mock. Mr. Chen cleared his throat nervously. Mr. Johnson, what exactly do you want from us? James's response was measured and precise. I want Brittany to understand that actions have consequences. I want her to understand that my daughter is not an acceptable target for her insecurities. And I want all of you to understand that if this behavior continues, I won't be having polite conversations in living rooms. The threat was implicit but unmistakable. Brittany, James turned to address the girl directly. Do you know what courage is? She shook her head. Courage isn't being fearless. Courage is being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. My daughter shows more courage walking into school every day, knowing she'll face people like you, than you've shown in your entire life. She could have changed schools, been homeschooled, hidden from the world. Instead, she chooses to face it head-on, every single day. Brittany was crying now, but James wasn't finished. Real strength isn't picking on people who are different from you. Real strength is protecting them. Real strength is standing up to people like the person you've chosen to be. Word traveled fast through Jefferson High School. By Monday morning, everyone knew that Maya Johnson's father was not someone you wanted to mess with. The video Derek had posted mocking Maya was gone, replaced by a lengthy apology that left no doubt about who the real coward was. Brittany Chen, meanwhile, had become notably subdued, her usual sharp tongue apparently dulled by fear, but James wasn't satisfied with just terrorizing the main perpetrators. He wanted to send a broader message. He showed up at the school during lunch period and asked to speak with Principal Davidson. When he was told he needed an appointment, James simply said, "Tell him Master Chief Johnson is here about his daughter Maya. He'll see me now." He was right. Principal Davidson was a decent man who had been genuinely unaware of the extent of Maya's situation. In his defense, Maya had never reported most of the incidents, choosing to handle things herself rather than be seen as a victim. "Mr. Johnson," Davidson said as James entered his office, "I have to say, there's been some concerning chatter about you confronting students." "Principal Davidson," James interrupted calmly, "with all due respect, my daughter has been enduring systematic harassment for months while your school did nothing. A blind girl was having food dumped on her, was being mocked online, and was being made to feel like she didn't belong here. Where was the school's concern then?" Davidson had the grace to look ashamed. "You're right. We failed Maya, and we failed you as a parent. But vigilante justice isn't the answer." "I haven't engaged in any vigilante justice," James said. "I've simply had some educational conversations with young people who apparently weren't learning what they needed to learn in school. Sometimes education happens outside the classroom." Davidson studied the man across from his desk. James Johnson was controlled, articulate, and absolutely terrifying in the most polite possible way. "What do you want from me, Mr. Johnson? I want you to understand that my daughter is not optional in this school. She's not a guest here, she's not a burden here, and she's sure as hell not a target here. She's a student with the same rights as everyone else. I want zero tolerance for harassment of any kind, and I want the staff trained to recognize and address disability-related bullying." Davidson nodded quickly. "Absolutely. We can implement new policies. I'm not finished." James leaned forward slightly. "I also want you to understand that I'll be keeping a very close eye on Maya's experience here. If there are any more incidents, any more students who think targeting my daughter is acceptable, they won't just be dealing with school discipline. They'll be dealing with me." "And Principal Davidson?" "Yes. I'm very good at my job." The change in Maya's school experience was immediate and dramatic. Students who had previously ignored her now nodded politely in the halls. Derek Martinez crossed to the other side of the hallway whenever he saw her coming. Brittany Chen had apparently discovered a sudden interest in volunteer work and was notably absent from her usual mean girl activities, but the most surprising change came from an unexpected source. "Maya?" A voice called out as she sat in the courtyard at lunch, the same spot where Derek had humiliated her just a week earlier. She turned toward the sound. "Yes? I'm Tyler Rodriguez. I'm in your AP history class." Maya nodded. She remembered Tyler, quiet, smart, never part of the popular crowd but never targeted either. "I wanted to say." Tyler paused, clearly struggling with something. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. I saw what Derek and those guys were doing to you, and I never said anything. I should have stood up for you." Maya was quiet for a moment. "Why didn't you?" Tyler sat down across from her, uninvited but somehow welcome. "Honestly? Because I was scared they'd start targeting me instead. Which is a pretty crappy reason." "Yes," Maya said simply. "It is." Tyler winced but didn't argue. "You're right. But I was thinking, maybe it's not too late to do better?" Over the following weeks, Tyler became Maya's unofficial bodyguard and genuine friend. But he wasn't the only one. Other students, kids who had been silent witnesses to Maya's harassment, began to find their voices. Sarah Kim from Maya's chemistry class started sitting with her at lunch. Marcus Thompson, a basketball player, made a point of walking with Maya between certain classes. Even some of the teachers began paying closer attention, shutting down the kind of casual cruelty that had been overlooked before. 3 weeks after James Johnson's educational visits, Maya came home from school with something her father hadn't seen in months: a genuine smile. "Good day," he asked, looking up from the mission reports he'd been reviewing. "Really good day," Maya confirmed, settling into her favorite chair with her homework. "Tyler asked me to the winter formal." James raised an eyebrow. "Tyler Rodriguez? The kid from your history class? You've done a background check on him, haven't you?" Maya said with amusement. "Honor roll student, volunteers at the animal shelter, no criminal record, parents are both teachers." James rattled off. "He seems decent." "He is decent." "And Dad?" "Yeah. Thank you. For what you did." "I know it wasn't exactly conventional." James set aside his papers and moved to sit closer to his daughter. "Maya, I need you to understand something. What I did wasn't just about stopping those kids from bothering you. It was about making sure you know that you never have to face the world alone." Maya reached out and found her father's hand. "I know, Dad. But I also need you to know something." "What's that?" "I was handling it. Maybe not in the most effective way, but I was handling it. I'm stronger than you think." James squeezed her hand. "Princess, I've always known exactly how strong you are. You're the strongest person I've ever met. But strength doesn't mean you have to carry everything alone. And sometimes, people need to be reminded that there are consequences for their actions." Maya was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "So what you're saying is, I have my own personal Navy SEAL as backup?" "Always," James said seriously. "Always." A month later, James was back on base, preparing for another deployment. But this time, he left with complete confidence in Maya's situation. The school had implemented new anti-bullying policies. Maya had a solid group of friends. Derek Martinez had transferred to another school, his parents deciding that a fresh start might be good for him. And Brittany Chen had undergone what could only be described as a complete personality transplant, becoming almost aggressively nice to everyone, especially students who might be considered different. Maya, meanwhile, was thriving. Her grades remained perfect, she'd joined the debate team, and she'd started a support group for students with disabilities. She was no longer just surviving high school, she was conquering it. The last conversation James had before leaving was with Principal Davidson. "Your daughter is remarkable," Davidson said. "She's become a real leader here." "She always was," James replied. "She just needed people to stop getting in her way." Davidson nodded thoughtfully. "Mr. Johnson, I have to ask, what you did, confronting those students directly, do you think it was right?" James considered the question seriously. "Principal Davidson, I spent 12 years protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Sometimes that meant following rules and protocols. Sometimes it meant doing what needed to be done, rules be damned. My daughter needed protection, and your system wasn't providing it." He paused, looking out the window toward the courtyard where Maya was laughing with her friends. "But more than that, those kids needed to learn that actions have consequences. That there are people in this world who won't tolerate cruelty. That being a bully isn't consequence-free fun, it's a choice that can come back to bite you." Davidson was quiet for a moment. "And if another parent complained about your methods?" James smiled, and this time it was genuinely warm. "Principal Davidson, do you see any other parents lining up to complain about their kids being taught to be better people?" Maya Johnson graduated as valedictorian of Jefferson High School. Her graduation speech, titled "The Strength to See Beyond Sight," brought the entire auditorium to tears. Tyler Rodriguez was her date to prom and remained her boyfriend throughout their senior year. Derek Martinez, who had struggled at his new school, eventually reached out to Maya through social media to offer a genuine apology for his behavior. Maya, with characteristic grace, accepted it and even offered to tutor him in chemistry when he was struggling with college prep. Brittany Chen became a social worker, dedicating her career to helping at-risk youth. She later credited Maya Johnson with teaching her what real strength looks like. James Johnson retired from the Navy SEALs after 20 years of service and became a high school counselor, specializing in working with students who face bullying and discrimination. His methods were unconventional but effective, and he never had to make another house call to terrify teenage bullies. Maya went on to Harvard Law School with a full scholarship, intending to specialize in disability rights. She still kept in touch with her high school friends, still played piano, and still volunteered at animal shelters wherever she lived, and every morning, no matter where in the world James Johnson was, he woke up proud of the extraordinary woman his daughter had become, not despite her challenges, but because of how she'd chosen to meet them. Because in the end, the real lesson wasn't about what happens when you mess with a Navy SEAL's daughter. It was about what happens when you underestimate the power of love, protection, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Sometimes, the strongest people are the ones who can't see the obstacles in front of them. They only see the path forward, and sometimes, it takes a warrior to remind the world that kindness is not weakness, and that those who protect the vulnerable are the true heroes among us.